Good evening and welcome to Tata Literature Live, the Mumbai International Lit Fest, co-sponsored by Tata Steel and Tata Projects and powered by Godrej. There will be a short question and answer session at the end of this session, so please leave any questions that you may have in the comments section. Today, we are in conversation with Dr. Nguyen Phan Mai, an author and journalist from Vietnam. Her book, The Mountain Sing, has recently won 6 awards, including runner-up for the Dayton Literary Peace Prize. The Mountain Sing takes us through the rich Vietnamese culture and tradition through personal life accounts. Quay Mai's passion for empowering others has been translated into volunteering roles in refugee centers and other such organizations. She has been named Forbes Vietnam as one of 20 inspiring women of 2021. She today is in conversation with Supriya Nair, writer, producer, and founder of new media company All Things Small, and is the editor of the publication 52. Now, Tragedy and Triumph. Over to you, Supriya.
Thank you, Kokila. Thank you, everyone who is tuning in to listen to Dr. Nguyen Phan Mai talk about The Mountain Sing, her extraordinary novel that's been read and loved by countless people around the world, and that I hope many of you, if you're in India, have had a chance to read or to buy. It was certainly one of the highlights of what has been a very difficult reading year for me personally, because it's not easy to be reading and thinking and feel like literature can open your heart in a difficult time, which is something I think many people in the audience might relate to. You're not alone. Quay Mai, thank you so much for joining us. Where are you at the moment? And what has 2021 been like for you?
Thank you so much for having me here today. First of all, I'd like to thank Kokila for your very kind introduction. Thank you, Supriya, for the honor of this conversation. Thank you to all the organizers of this amazing festival. I'm so honored and delighted to be here. So, with the pandemic, when the pandemic was hitting India really hard, I was like praying for India and all my readers and friends in India, and I'm so happy that you survived and we're here together. And I think literature played a very important role for me during the last year as well. I read a lot. I connected with a lot of people virtually, and so I'm now currently doing this crazy US book tour. I was in Dayton to receive the runner-up for the Dayton Literary Peace Prize, and I met and spent the whole weekend with Margaret Atwood, who's my hero, and she read my poems. So she told me, wonderful things about myself that I didn't know before. So it was wonderful. And then I met up with amazing writers, and I'm on a 14-city book tour. So, I have events lined up every day, and it's like amazing that I can be part of your festival virtually as well. So thank you for having me. It's my great honor.
Well, thank you for joining us in Bombay, even if it is through even if it is digitally, and I hope we can meet in person sometime soon. I want to introduce The Mountain Sing to readers, particularly those who may not be familiar with it. And I think the best way to do that would actually be to jump right into a question about its main characters, right? So this is a novel that is, as you know from the title of the session, an intergenerational saga. It encapsulates a certain modern history of Vietnam, and it's structured chiefly through 2 narrative voices. They're kind of the needle and thread of this history. And one of them is a grandmother who survived multiple cataclysms. Like the modern history of Vietnam is literally also her biography. And I loved how beautifully and poetically and insightfully you told us the history of a nation through a grandmother's secrets, Quay Mai. Can you tell us a little bit about Zillan and the creative choices that went into her character?
Thank you. Thank you for your very nice words about my novel. So, when I was born, both of my grandmothers had died. So I was really jealous of friends who had grandmothers to tell them stories and keep their family traditions alive. So I used to hang out a lot at my friends' houses and listen to their grandmothers. And I told myself one day I would write a book with a grandmother in it, so I would have a grandma. I decided to fictionalize, the lives of my grandmothers as well as the lives of the grandmothers whom I interview into the life of Grandma Zillan. And the Mountain Sing continues the oral storytelling tradition of Vietnam by featuring grandmother Zillan telling her family stories to her granddaughter, and with her granddaughter continuing that storytelling until the end of the book, where she burns a copy of the manuscript to offer to her grandma who had died. So there's a circle of storytelling there, and I think oral storytelling tradition is something that helped Vietnamese people survive throughout our turbulent history, and I wanted to highlight the role of women in our society and our history, because like if you watch Hollywood movies, normally you see Vietnamese women as prostitutes, as those absent of trauma and absent of agency, and I want to write against that. I want to write about the women who had no choice but to become pillars of our families and our society. And we had to be, it was the women, the Vietnamese women, who had to be the shoulder of men, for men to lean on during and after the war. And I have so much admiration for so many Vietnamese women I know, especially my mother. So my mother worked as a rice farmer and as a teacher, and she went through a lot, but she was always hopeful. I remember that my husband was asking me, who laughed most in your family? And then he told me, your mother. She has a very carefree laugh, and if you meet her, you would not know that she is an orphan from a very young age. Both her parents died when she was very young, and she's like a witness of Vietnamese history, and she's always hopeful. And she often quotes the proverb for me, like, trong cái rủi có cái may. Good luck hides inside bad luck. She always tell me that. So whenever something bad happens to us, she always said, trong cái rủi có cái may. Good luck hides inside bad luck.
Right, which is a proverb we hear among others in the Mountain Sing as well, which the resilience of Grandma Zillan's character. It's easy to call characters like that resilient. The history of Asia, of Vietnam, and of Asia and of post-colonial Asia is of women who had to survive because they had no other choice. But the Mountain Sing shows us that they did it with joy and with hope and with shrewdness as well. When men had to be rigid, women could be flexible, and that's one of the things that comes through in the sort of layer after layer of stories that you craft for us. And Grandma Zillan's story has a counterpart in her little granddaughter, Huang, who's a very different kind of narrator, and who shares a lot with you in some respects, right?
Yeah, actually, when I wrote this story, I put myself into the position of Huang to be able to listen to my grandmothers. But I think, I also grew up witnessing the devastating impact of the Vietnam War, and as well as of many historical events on Vietnamese people in our family. So I wanted to fictionalize some of those experiences into the novel, even though Huang in the novel was born in 1960. So she's like 13 years older than me. So she witnessed the war directly, whereas I have no memory of the war. But I have a lot of memories about, the impact of the war. I was born 2 years before the war ended, but I grew up, seeing how my village was emptied of men who had gone to war and didn't come back, and full of women who kept waiting for these men. And also, so it was kind of fun to fictionalize some other things that I knew and make up other things that I didn't know, and from which I learned from other people. So I think, fiction is a wonderful way of getting to know yourself, getting to know about I love historical fiction, because through historical fiction, you can get to know stories, and at the same time, you get to know the history of a country and the lives of the people. And I wrote this novel when I was away from Vietnam. Like I started writing it when because my husband works in diplomatic services. So I've been, I'm a Vietnamese citizen, but I've been like traveling and living with him in different parts of the world. So I was in Bangladesh, I was in the Philippines, I was in Belgium, in Indonesia, and currently in Kyrgyzstan. So I started writing this book as part of my master's in creative writing in distance learning when I was in Manila, the Philippines, and I continued to write it when I was in Belgium, and I finished in Indonesia. So writing it was a way for me to return home. I had to bring Vietnam alive onto my pages so that I could taste the food, listen to the language, see the people, and see the landscape, because Vietnam is such a rich and complex country, and I'm just a very small part of it. And I wanted to put myself in the book to be able to understand the complexity of Vietnamese people and of our history.
It's so interesting. It's so striking to me that you brought up the landscape of Vietnam and you stitching your country together in your imagination with this novel. Because, again, going by the Hollywood movie standard, Vietnam, will make maybe a generation of movie watchers think about paddy fields and battlefields and jungles, maybe. But a whole landscape unfurls. You recreate cities for us, big cities for us. You recreate streets, farms, houses, shacks, shops, and it's the complexity with which all of that comes alive is really striking to me. And I felt, along with this family that you were writing about, you had also introduced the land itself as a character to us in The Mountain Sing.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the land itself, I grew up in the countryside, so I love nature and I love landscapes. And there is one sentence in the novel where Grandma Zillan said, "When humans save us, nature can save us." And I in the novel, and I describe the landscape of Vietnam and also the devastation that the war caused to our nature and our landscape. For example, millions of tons of Asian orange were dumped onto Vietnam. And that chemical still stays in our food and water. And babies are still being born deformed in Vietnam because of Asian orange. So I wanted to highlight that part, and how horrible wars is. Wars do not just kill and injure people. Wars break families apart, destroy our culture, destroy our nature, the fabrics of our society. So I'm so grateful that you mentioned about Hollywood movies, and normally there have been a lot of movies made about Vietnam and a lot of books written about Vietnam in English, but most of them put the Western perspective in the forefront, with Vietnamese people in the background to the Western stories. So that's why, even though my book is set against the Vietnam War, but I did not give Americans any speaking role.
You didn't?
Yes, only I highlight, Vietnamese people and our stories, because the war did so many terrible things to us. It tore apart our country and our community. There are still people, we are still deeply divided by the war. And I wanted to write this book to bring us together, to reconcile, to present the Vietnamese perspectives from different sides, you know, because Vietnam was divided into North Vietnam and South Vietnam during the war. We were fighting against each other, brothers and sisters against each other. So the forgiveness is so difficult. And, you know, for so many Vietnamese, we haven't been able to forgive each other. And that's very difficult. And that's why, you know, I use a family to represent Vietnam. And the book reflects the reality that brothers and sisters in this Chan family fought against each other during the war. So after the war, it's very difficult for them to come together, to forgive and to move on and be together as a family. And this is the reality in Vietnam for Vietnamese people. I know so many families who have members who fought against each other and they are still suffering. And if we don't talk about it, if we don't reconcile, if we don't heal together, that trauma is passed on from one generation to the next. And I think it's the responsibility of the second generation like myself who have to come together. And I wrote this book. I did not know how the Vietnamese community would feel. And I am so grateful that we are coming together. Like tomorrow, I have a fundraiser in Los Angeles. So the Vietnamese community in Orange County, like one of the large areas in the U.S. with a lot of Vietnamese people stay, they heard I was coming, so they have this idea to host me, and like businesses are donating food, people are making food, volunteering, donating products. So we are selling tickets, and we are donating all the proceeds to the to charities in Vietnam to provide educational opportunities for disadvantaged children. And I'm so grateful and excited about the conversations I'm having with Vietnamese in the diaspora, Vietnamese from inside Vietnam, because these are the types of conversation we need to have, and they are long overdue.
I didn't realize that the novel would have such a diffused real world impact, even though I knew that it would like move everyone who read it. And I was curious particularly about Vietnamese reactions to it, both in the diaspora and within Vietnam itself. Can you tell us a little bit more about how people are reading the novel in your home country?
So I mean, I've just been so amazed. I mean, there have been two readers who reached out to me. One in California, and she told me that her mom abandoned her when she was a child, and she grew up with other people, and she never forgave her mom. She didn't talk to her mom for more than 10 years. And after reading the mountain thing, she realized what her mom must have gone through, because Grandma Zillan in her book had no choice but to abandon her kids one after the next. So you know, my reader read the book and thought about her mom and called her mom. And for the first time, her mom told her what happened to her and why she had to give her up. And they started speaking, and now they tell each other they love each other. You know, it's an amazing thing. And she's coming to the fundraiser tomorrow to see me, and I'm so excited. And there's another reader in London who reached out to me, and she said that she's Vietnamese, British, and she did not speak to her dad for many years because she didn't understand why the father was always unhappy with the life they had in the UK. And then after reading the book, she reached out to her father, and they had a meal at a Vietnamese restaurant after like 5 or 6 years. And for the first time, the father showed her pictures of him during the war and told her what happened to him and why he's been so traumatized. And so now they speak with each other regularly, you know, and this is such a great gift. And I have had book clubs with readers from inside Vietnam, and then there are young people who told me, there are young people who said, we did not know what happened to our family during the Great Hunger, during the land reform, because our parents didn't want to talk about this. It was too hard for them. And with the book, they were able to ask questions, and their parents could tell them. And I think the ability to ask questions is really important. I think our parents, our elderly people in the family have so much to tell us if we know what questions to ask, if we show them we are willing to listen. And I think in the Vietnamese society today, as with many other society, we are too busy, right? The younger people, we are busy with our job, with social media, with so many other things. We forget to talk to the elderly people about what they went through. We forget to connect in the deepest way. When is the last time that we put away all of our electronics and like just spend the whole day talking with our family without caring about anything else, you know? I mean, I treasure those kind of conversations, and I think there is so much we can learn about ourselves if we talk more to our family members.
I love that you said that, because it also reminds me of what the Mountain Sing does. That's that's in continuity with this, but also different. Because through Huang, we get not just the full picture of what happened to make her the person she is, but also hope for the future, because she's a writer, she's a thinker, she's a woman of letters, and so she can imagine a future that her mother and grandmother, have been too busy to do, and whose experiences have been very different from her own. So she's a child of hope and optimism. And I think what you talk about is the responsibility of the second generation to build bridges and to heal wounds. That really reflects beautifully in her part of the story. This is your first novel in English, and you are a poet and a scholar. Do you see yourself as a literary innovator with The Mountain Sing?
Oh, thank you for your kind words. So I think with every project, I challenge myself. So I published 8 books of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction in Vietnamese language. And I was a translator for many years. So I was looking for a novel to translate into English because I wanted, so little Vietnamese literature has been translated and published overseas. And then I was looking for a novel until one day I told myself, why don't I write it myself? Because it takes, I think it's easier to write something than to translate it. As a translator, I have very high standards to kind of, because translation is a difficult job and very time consuming. So, I had to use the dictionary when I wrote this book because, I started to learn English from the 8th grade, and I don't live in an English speaking country, so there was a lot of learning, and I innovated myself by introducing Vietnamese language and culture into this book because Vietnam has been subject to colonization. So our language, whenever published as part of the English text, it is stripped away from the diacritics. We no longer have the tonal marks. So I wanted to preserve, I wanted to undo the loss caused by colonization, and I wanted to present Vietnam as it is, show respect and demand respect for the Vietnamese culture. So in this book, I challenge the readers by presenting more than 20 names of characters in the full diacritics, and each name has a special meaning, and it has to come with the diacritical marks, and this book is not a very easy book because to follow it, you have to remember the characters' names. You have to remember certain Vietnamese words, which I don't translate, but I encourage the reader to kind of experience it and have a feeling for it and interpret it in their own way. And I think, readers are very clever. Readers, are amazing. They are open to these opportunities to accept our culture if we give them the opportunity. Yeah, so I think I learned a lot through writing The Mountain Sing. And with my second novel, Dust Child, which will be coming in June 2023, I do another thing, which is quite crazy. So in the second novel of mine, I will have a voice of of an American man. So I dare to write in the voice of a traumatized American veteran, because American people have written in the point of view of Vietnamese for a long time. now I like, okay, I will do it. I will do the opposite. Why don't I write in the voice of an American man? So it has been a fun process, and I'm really grateful. I know a lot of friends who are veterans, and they, I can ask them questions, or they also read the manuscript and give me feedback, and like there's so many types of research you can do. And I mean, anyone can write about anything if you do research and you write it with understanding and compassion.
That is an amazing thing to say. Thank you so much. And compassion is so fundamental to your writing, that's really lovely and inspirational to hear. We have a little bit of time for questions from our audience, so I'm going to turn to that, if that's okay with you. I'm just looking it up on my phone. We have a question from Shubha, who says, you mentioned that you missed having a grandmother, and so you created one in your book. To what extent do your characters become a part of you? Do you miss them when you finish writing?
Oh, thank you so much. I wish I could see the audience. Thank you so much for attending our session. I want to hug you all. I want to return to India and hug you for real, okay? I visited in India a couple of times and loved every moment of it. So to return to the question, I mean, you know, when I wrote this book, took me 7 years to write, and the characters grew into me and became a part of my life. And I remember that during the 7 years I wrote this book, there were several times my husband said, "This book is going to kill you," because I worked on it nonstop. I was haunted by my characters and what they went through. So they lived with me. They was a part of my life, and they often woke me up. They said, "Get up and write. Our stories cannot sleep until you tell them." So I was compelled to write this book. I mean, I still think about all the characters in my novel. They feel very real to me. I think a joy of being a writer is that you discover your characters, and as you map them out, as you give them flesh and soul in language and behaviors, they are like your, I don't know, some authors said, the characters are like their children, but for me, the characters in this book are those who inspired me. They teach me so many things that I need to know.
So they're children, but they're also teachers, parents, a whole host of
Yeah.
roles. Um, a question from Ishani. Women in your story are extremely strong. How do women cope with such memories and loss in Vietnam today?
Thank you so much, Ishani, for such a brilliant question. Um, I think the women of Vietnam are survivors. They also carried the torch of love and compassion. The women of Vietnam are among the hardest working people. We are expected to cook for our family, take care of the children, and still be successful in our career, and make a contribution to our society. So, I mean, I think the sad thing is that we are expected to deal with trauma ourselves, because the traumatized people are seen as possessed by ghosts. So many women have to hide their trauma. So that's why it's very important for me to document the trauma by women. And Grandma Zillan said, women are seen as not being entitled to trauma because we didn't fight in the war, but actually we suffer from the war, and we have to inherit the trauma from returning soldiers. So there's still a lot that we can do for the women of Vietnam. For example, in creating opportunity for them to open up so they can talk about trauma and heal. We can do a lot to empower the women, because there are still gender issues in Vietnam. And I think I'm really grateful that our community have wonderful women leaders who are inspiring. I mean, throughout the history of Vietnam, we have really strong and unique women. For example, one of the poets, well-known poets of Vietnam is Hồ Xuân Hương, who wrote about taboo subjects with her poetry. She writes about sex in her poetry, and she used food to talk about sex. So that's really innovative and a lot of fun. We also, have women leaders. Like if you go to Vietnam, you see the street of Hai Bà Trưng, the Trưng sisters. So they were the lead. They are the heroes of Vietnamese people. They led men. They led Vietnamese armies and to defeat the Chinese invaders. We have ministers who are women, and we have the Vietnamese national women football team, who is so successful and who don't get so many, who are not like as popular as the men's team, but I feel they are even better than the men's team. Sorry, men's team. but I think, the role of women of Vietnam, the women of Vietnam should be appreciated more, because we've done so much for others. And they are women who are still being sold on, like being trafficked. So they are really devastating stories that I know of women being trafficked, being deceived into prostitution and sold across border to Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia. So I think we need to do more for the women in Vietnam and everywhere.
Thank you so much. That was a really insightful answer, and I know that comes from a place that is deeply personal. As someone who cares about and has written about a lot of this history in your novel. I'm afraid that's all we have time for with Khuê Mai. Thank you everyone for joining us. It's been an honor and a pleasure. I cannot wait to read your next novel. Thank you for telling us about it. And we will see you in India soon, and face to face, and get those hugs you talked about. So see you soon, and over to you, Kokila.
Thanks so much, Supriya. Thank you, Khuê Mai. That was such a moving session. I feel like there were so many moments where I was genuinely moved to tears hearing the things that you had to say, the real person accounts that people had when reading your book. And thank you so much to our lovely audience for joining us today. Tata Literature Live, co-sponsored by Tata Steel and Tata Projects, and powered by Godrej, continues with many more such sessions. So please look at the schedule and join us again tomorrow. The books in today's session can be purchased online from our knowledge partner, landmarkexcite.com. Thank you again for a wonderful session.